I don't know whether you've noticed, but Ireland aren't very good at football. The Republic of Ireland national team is currently ranked 48th in the FIFA World Rankings, up a massive one place from 49th a year ago, but still below the likes of Egypt, Scotland, and Mali. In 2020, Ireland didn't win a single game, and things got even worse in 2021 when Stephen Kenny's side lost 1-0 at home to Luxembourg, a country with the same sized population as Dublin, in a defeat that ended Ireland's aspirations of qualifying for the 2022 World Cup before they had even begun. It's now more than 20 years since Ireland last qualified for the World Cup, and despite the increase from 16 to 24 teams, the boys in green also failed to qualify for Euro 2020, and they will have to finish above France and the Netherlands in order to qualify automatically for Euro 2024. Perhaps none of this should be all that surprising. The Republic of Ireland is a country of barely 5 million people, where, unlike in a lot of similarly sized European countries, football doesn't remotely monopolise the nation's sporting talent or interest. Gaelic sports, most notably Gaelic football, enjoy massive support, with both Gaelic football and hurling attracting larger crowds than association football. Meanwhile, Ireland currently ranks first in the world in the Rugby Union World Rankings. It wasn't always this way though, believe it or not, but when FIFA first published their world rankings in December 1992, Ireland were ranked as the 6th best national team on the planet, above Argentina and the Netherlands, and just one place below England. Ireland reached the quarter-finals of Italia 90, they beat Italy at the 1994 World Cup, and they drew with Germany on the biggest stage in 2002. Those Ireland teams contained genuine global superstars, whether that be Roy Keane, Dennis Irwin, or Paul McGrath. Those three have all long since retired, as have the likes of Damien Duff, Shay Given and Robbie Keane, but though things may be bleak on the surface for Ireland, there is just a sneaking suspicion now that the future could be very bright indeed. With Gavin Bazunu starring in goal for Southampton at the age of only 21, and an 18-year-old Evan Ferguson looking like the next Harry Kane at Brighton, along with a whole host of lesser-known Irish men, or at least Irish-eligible internationals, starring within the youth team game, it's hardly surprising that some people are beginning to wonder whether the Republic of Ireland might just be on the verge of that most loaded of phrases, the golden generation. So, as someone who is at least 7% Irish according to Ancestry DNA, I want to take a look at this budding crop of Irish players. I mean, who could be better suited to doing so? Where they're from, how good they are, what the Ireland team might look like over the next decade, and whether it would be too premature for Ireland fans to start buying their Euro 2028 champion scarves just yet. The first thing to say about Ireland's supposed golden generation is that not many people saw this coming. At least the past 2 decades for Irish football have been a tale of farce and decline. Whereas most of the Ireland team played regularly for, or even starred for top 6 Premier League teams at the 2002 World Cup, now the national team draws most of their players from Championship and even League One clubs. There are now, at most, 3 Irish players who get regular first-team football for any Premier League team, and I mean no disrespect to someone like James McLean when I say that, had he been born 20 years earlier, he may never have won a cap for Ireland. As it happens though, he has won 96. The reason few foresaw any kind of turnaround on this front is because Irish football has been left to rot over recent years. John Delaney ran the FAI like his own personal fiefdom as chief executive from 2005 through to 2019, spending more money on elaborate birthday celebrations than on grassroots football. Youth training facilities and infrastructure are barely existent, let alone of a competitive standard, and the League of Ireland remains an afterthought for virtually everyone, whether that be politicians, administrators, or, as a consequence, football fans. I have made an entire video about John Delaney's wanton mismanagement of Irish football, which is, I think, 39 minutes long, and I still had to leave a great deal out, should any of you be interested in how we got to this point, and why a great many people feel that he should be behind bars, but that is the reality that now confronts Irish football. The one saving grace for Irish football, at least as far as budding young Irish players and the future prospects of the Ireland national team is concerned, is that they have the richest league in all of world football, with the best funded academies, right on their doorstep. If you take a look at some of the brightest lights amongst the next generation of Irish players, as we are about to in more detail, whether that be Andrew Omobama-Dillé, Andrew Moran, Nathan Collins or Caoimhín Kelleher, they all spent at least some time in the academies of Premier League or Championship clubs. Of course, it's not as simple as saying that this is an unequivocally good or bad thing for Irish football. The benefit is access to a level of coaching and, certainly facilities, broadly speaking, which just aren't available in Ireland. Meanwhile, the negatives are obvious for the League of Ireland, stripped of the country's best young players before they are even old enough to buy a pint of Guinness, and it also means that a pathway to first-team football is fraught with challenges. It should go without saying, but breaking into the Dundalk or Shamrock Rovers first team as a promising youngster is significantly easier than breaking into the first team at Manchester United, Arsenal, or even Southampton. It's also an avenue for Irish players, which has in some senses now been cut off. Nathan Collins was 15 when he joined Stoke City, Andrew Moran just 16 when he was signed by Brighton, and Jason Knight was the same age when he went to Derby County. Post-Brexit rule changes, however, mean that none of those moves would now be possible, with Irish players treated no differently to any other players from EU countries, severely tightening their entry requirements and outright banning any Irish players from moving to English clubs before the age of 18. That puts the onus on the Irish government, the FAI, and Irish football clubs to nurture players who are good enough, once they reach the age of 18, to still attract Premier League and other top-flight interest. The Irish government, under various Taoiseachs and ruling parties, has appeared to have, if not an outright disdain for football, or soccer, then, at best, a not-so-subtle kind of disinterest. As is the case throughout so much of the world, soccer, and I am using that word to avoid any confusion, is the most popular working-class sport in Ireland. Indeed, whilst Gaelic football and hurling attract higher matchday attendances in Ireland, soccer still leads the way in terms of participation, with more than twice as many Irishmen regularly playing soccer than Gaelic football. The GAA, or Gaelic Athletic Association by contrast, while still having a significant presence in working-class communities, is undoubtedly much more middle-class. That is reflected in the amount of funding that various sports receive, and the amount of political will that is invested in them. In the Irish government's 2017 Capital Sports Programme, €62 million was ring-fenced for Irish sport, €25 million of it going to the GAA, compared to just €7.7 million for soccer. Of the €70 million COVID-19 Resilience Fund for Irish sports set up in 2020, almost €31 million was set aside for Gaelic games, €18 million for the Irish Rugby Football Union, yet just €13 million for the Football Association of Ireland. The problem goes far beyond just a lack of funding, though. In December 2020, the Irish government forced the FAI to abort the remainder of Ireland's under-13, under-15, under-17 and under-19 soccer seasons due to COVID-19 restrictions. That is despite Gaelic games, on the other hand, at both senior and minor county level, being allowed to continue under Level 3 restrictions, leading to accusations of double standards and continued implicit bias against what is, I will reiterate, by far the most popular participation sport in Ireland. Sinn Féin, who are currently polling 10% higher than any other party in Ireland, and are widely expected to win the most seats by some margin at the next Irish general election either on or before February 20th, 2025, were vocal critics of the perceived double standards and the discrimination against soccer, and there will be hope amongst some people that the party will be more sympathetic towards and supportive of soccer than any of their predecessors. It seems likely that will be the case, though it is not exactly clear-cut, and outside of advocating for a united Ireland national team, which is another point of consideration going forward, they are yet to really propose anything too concrete in terms of what they would do to aid the growth of soccer in Ireland, or by what degree they would increase the sport's funding. When you compare the attitudes of politicians and subsequently the policies of the Irish government in regard to soccer, compared to those in similarly sized countries like Denmark or Croatia, it is hardly surprising that Ireland barely scrapes into the top 50 of the FIFA World Rankings, whilst Denmark and Croatia rank 18th and 7th respectively, and have reached 3 semi-finals and a final at the last Euros and 2 World Cups between them. Ireland have never reached the semi-finals of any major tournament, but the examples set by not just Denmark and Croatia, but also Wales, of course, in 2016, and historically most notably of all Uruguay, show that it is possible for smaller countries to certainly make their mark. To lay all of the blame at the door of the Irish government, though, would be a total distortion. The GAA may receive a lot more funding than the FAI, but they also make far better use of every euro that they receive. The FAI, put simply, has an outstanding track record of being grossly negligent and financially irresponsible, to put it in the nicest possible terms there, and at times downright criminal in its distribution of funds. If you were being sympathetic towards Irish politicians, and I quite frankly see no reason why you should be, you could argue that their reluctance to hand vast sums of money over to the FAI is, on that basis, actually pretty understandable. It is difficult to overstate the damage that John Delaney did to Irish football, hence why it took me 39 minutes to even attempt it, but his legacy, and the legacy of the FAI, can be seen at football clubs at every level up and down the Republic of Ireland, where you will find inadequate facilities and poor quality pitches. Without fail now, when a player or coach returns to Ireland following a number of years playing in England or elsewhere, the first thing that they comment on tends to be how poor the facilities are by comparison not just to football in England, but to other sports in Ireland. When Damien Duff took over as Shelbourne manager in 2021, one of the first things that he said was, quote, "Forget about Shelbourne and me, this is the most important thing that I've said today. The League of Ireland facilities across the board, Premier and First Division, are horrific when you compare it to Gaelic." Later adding, "We are light years behind everywhere. This isn't me having a pop at the FAI, it's factual. Go see every country, the training grounds, what players are given, so it's gone wrong somewhere along the line." End quote. I have spent a lot of time focusing on the negatives there because, they are plentiful, and I do think that they are extremely damaging and will prohibit Irish football from ever realising its true potential unless they are properly addressed. But it is about time that I focused on some of the positives, which are also plentiful, and those players who have given hope of a potential Irish golden generation, despite the odds being stacked so firmly against one. Ireland are absolutely blessed in the goalkeeping department, courtesy of 21-year-old number 1 Gavin Bazunu, who has impressed at Southampton this season, 24-year-old Caoimhín Kelleher, who is Alison Becker's deputy at Liverpool, but has already registered 20 first-team appearances at Anfield, and 23-year-old Mark Travers, who serves as Neto's backup at Bournemouth, having been their number 1 as they won promotion from the Championship last season, and even this season, he has made 11 appearances in the Premier League. You would imagine that the battle for the number 1 shirt will be between Bazunu and Kelleher for the next decade and beyond, unless someone else comes along, and it is a battle that will inevitably be dependent upon the fate of their club careers. Bazunu has currently won 13 caps to Kelleher's 9, despite being a few years younger, whilst Travers has won 3, and it was Bazunu who started during Ireland's most recent international break. Whilst Bazunu is playing regular first-team football, and Kelleher isn't, you'd have to expect him to have the edge, and I also think that he is the better goalkeeper from what I have seen of the pair of them, but the most important thing for Irish football is the sheer abundance of talented young keepers competing for a starting berth. In my potential Ireland Euro 2028/2030 World Cup starting 11 then, it is Bazunu who gets the nod for now. Whilst there is some uncertainty at fullback for Ireland, with Seamus Coleman, Matt Doherty, Cyrus Christie and Enda Stevens all now on the wrong side of 30, the future looks very bright at centre-back thanks to Andrew Omobamidele, Nathan Collins and Dara O'Shea. O'Shea is the oldest of the three, at 24, and whilst Collins is the only one who is currently in the Premier League, all three have played top-flight football in England in the past, and I would be willing to bet some money, a bit, that all three will end up playing there long-term. In Ireland's most recent internationals, against Scotland and Armenia, Stephen Kenny played a back three of Collins, O'Shea and John Egan. Egan is 30 years old now, while Shane Duffy is 31, and I would expect Omobamidele, who has already won 5 caps at the age of 20, to displace them permanently before too long. I have gone with Collins and Omobamidele as my two, but O'Shea is already captaining a West Brom side with aspirations of Premier League promotion, and if all three continue on their current trajectories, I suspect that Kenny and his potential successors would have to entertain the possibility of persisting with a 3. At fullback, which some pinpoint as a problem area for Ireland's next generation, I don't think the future is necessarily that bleak. Ryan Johansson, who I've got at right back, is currently contracted to Sevilla and spent last season on loan at Fortuna Sittard. Johansson has already represented Luxembourg, Sweden and Ireland at U-team level, but most recently Ireland's under-21s, which surely ought to be promising. At left back, Dublin-born Tayo Adaramola has been at Crystal Palace since the age of 11. Still only 19 now, Adaramola has only played 3 games for Palace to date, but the Eagles do have a fantastic track record when it comes to developing fullbacks, and Adaramola already represents Ireland at under-21 level. If there is one thing that Ireland's next generation is lacking, most crucially in my view, it is a truly elite level, or potentially elite level, central or holding midfielder. Josh Cullen is a key cog at Burnley, who are one of the best teams we have ever seen in the Championship, and he has already won 22 caps for Ireland at the age of 26. Derby's Jason Knight, a favourite of Wayne Rooney's during his time in Derbyshire, is the man who I've got partnering him, capped 17 times already, at the age of 22. Those are the two that I have starting long-term for Ireland, but if anyone can dislodge them and become a real driving force in Ireland's midfield, then I think it's probably Wolves' 20-year-old Joe Hodge. In attacking midfield, Andrew Moran is the obvious candidate, signed by Brighton in 2020, having made his debut for Bray Wanderers at the age of 15. Still only 19 now, Moran made his Premier League debut against Everton in January, and given that everything that Brighton touch seems to turn to gold at this moment in time, the omens for Moran and their other Irish imports can only be positive. My front three is made up of Troy Parrott, Kevin Zeffy and Evan Ferguson, the last of whom is, without a doubt as far as I'm concerned, the star of this side, and arguably of the current Ireland side, despite only having turned 18 this season. Parrott is someone who there has long been a lot of excitement about in Ireland, currently on loan at Preston North End, which is his 4th loan move away from Tottenham Hotspur. At the age of 21, he has already won 17 caps for Ireland at senior international level. Maybe expectations have been somewhat tempered by Parrott's return of 3 goals from 23 games this season, and certainly his goal-scoring instincts could be improved upon. Nonetheless, he still looks like a player on the handful of occasions that I've watched Preston this season, and I expect him to have a long-term future with Ireland, if not perhaps at Tottenham. Kevin Zeffy on the left flank is incredibly speculative, given that he only just turned 18. Signed by Inter Milan in 2021, having made his debut for Shamrock Rovers at the age of 15, Zeffy has bags of flair and is a superb dribbler of the ball, but he is yet to register a first-team appearance at the San Siro. Evan Ferguson is only a few months older than Zeffy, but he is already very much up and running in the Premier League. Both Brighton and Ireland's youngest ever Premier League goalscorer, Ferguson has scored 5 goals in 13 games so far this season, and I wouldn't be all that surprised if he ended the season with close to double figures. A big, mobile, and very gifted centre-forward, I hope I'm not putting too much pressure on Ferguson when I say that he reminds me a lot of Harry Kane. Notably, however, he is a far more impressive and complete player at 18 years old than Kane was. Whether he will be at 28, given what Kane has done in the game, is obviously an entirely different question, but he has all of the tools to become a world-class centre-forward, and unlike Kane, he's actually really quite quick. Brighton lacked goals under Graham Potter, and have never really had a top-class centre-forward in the Premier League. Roberto De Zerbi has already changed the first, and, I suspect, certainly from next season onwards, if they manage to keep hold of him, that Ferguson will change the second. Liverpool were desperate to sign Ferguson after he broke into the Bohemians' first team at 14 years old, but the County Meath native chose to join Brighton instead in 2021, believing that there was a clearer pathway for him into the first team. It didn't take long for him to be proven right. We have seen in the past what one talisman or world-class player can do for a relative minnow or smaller nation, and Ferguson has the potential to be that for Ireland, who have sorely lacked a centre-forward ever since Robbie Keane retired. That is my 11, though, as I look at it, I can't help but think that, given there are so many variables for Zeffy given his age and lack of experience, a 3-5-2 actually looks stronger, getting O'Shea into that rock-solid back three, Parrott into his more natural position, playing centrally alongside Ferguson, where he could provide an excellent foil for Ireland's star man, and with Zeffy playing the role of super sub, given that he is actually at his most content, playing centrally as well. That team still leaves out, solely in terms of young players, the likes of Sam Curtis, Mark McGuinness, Joel Bagan, Joe Hodge, Connor Coventry, Will Smallbone, Rocco Vata, Adam Ida, Justin Ferrazai, and Aaron Connolly. I wouldn't mention Connolly, who has been capped 8 times by Ireland at the age of 23, given his unimpressive spell on loan at Middlesbrough last season, were it not for the fact that I am a Hull City fan, where Connolly is currently on loan, and having had pretty strong reservations about his arrival, I must admit that I've been very pleasantly surprised. Connolly has admitted to having had a poor attitude and a lack of commitment to the sport in recent years, but claims those issues are behind him. That certainly looked to be the case upon his first 5 games for the Tigers, in which he has looked sharp, his first touch has been fantastic, and he bagged a couple of goals on his birthday. Unfortunately, he is currently out injured, but if he returns and continues in a similar vein, I see no reason why he couldn't return to the fold for Ireland and become a really useful weapon off the bench, particularly against some tired legs. To conclude then, I suppose cautious optimism is probably the best approach when it comes to the future of Irish football, or at least the future of the Republic of Ireland national team. The under-21s finished second in their group in Euro 2023 qualifying, below Italy but above Sweden, Bosnia and Montenegro, before losing a playoff on penalties to Israel. That was a setback, but still a major improvement upon Ireland's under-21 qualifying campaigns in 2019 and 2015. The under-19s, meanwhile, starring the likes of Sam Curtis, Justin Ferrazai, Kevin Zeffy and Rocco Vata, recently won their UEFA Under-19 Championship qualifying group, finishing above both Hungary and Wales and progressing to the elite round. Without going all kumbaya on you, Irish football, particularly at the youth level, continues to feel the benefits of diversity and immigration. One of Ireland's greatest ever players, Paul McGrath, was half Nigerian, and the likes of Gavin Bazunu, Adam Ida, Michael Obafemi, Chiroze Ogbene, Olamide Shodipo, Andrew Omobama-Dile, and Udinese's Festi Ebosele all have Nigerian roots as well, and all are eligible to represent Nigeria as well as Ireland. Zachary Elbazede, meanwhile, is eligible to represent Libya, Danny Mandreu is of Romanian descent, Kevin Zefe's family are from Albania, as are Rocco Vatters, and Ryan Johansson, as I mentioned earlier, has a Swedish father and was born in Luxembourg City. Clearly, this is a huge positive for Irish football, but it also means that they face eligibility challenges for a lot of their best players, not least from England. When Ireland reached the quarter-finals of the 1990 World Cup, 16 of their 23 players were born in the United Kingdom. The FAI, it was often joked at the time, stood for Find Another Irishman, and the English FA even had to create a new department to prevent Ireland from poaching Irish-eligible English youngsters. That has been restricted somewhat by FIFA tightening their own eligibility requirements, but it still presents a real problem for Ireland, and I need not remind you of the players that they have pinned so much hope upon in recent times, only to end up getting badly burnt. When you look at my potential long-term Ireland 11, whilst it is impossible to predict the fate of such young players, and Ferguson is pretty much the only one that I would hang my hat on at this stage, avoiding any freak incidents or injuries, there is enough talent to qualify for major tournaments, and I would argue to reach the knockout stages. Certainly, we have seen less talented groups of players reach the quarterfinals of tournaments in recent years, and in some cases, arguably even the semis. There are so many variables though, there aren't a lot of really good older players to help smoothen the transition for the next generation to come through, and the dreadful way in which football in Ireland has been mismanaged means that there are no guarantees that this current crop are anything other than a purple patch of productivity that we have seen lots of smaller countries enjoy over the years. In Stephen Kenny, if nothing else, Ireland have a manager who should be willing to give youngsters a chance given his own personal history, and why wouldn't he, given their talent and the relative lack of talent amongst Ireland's senior players. I had actually hoped to discuss the possibility of Irish reunification in this video and what that might mean for the League of Ireland, a unified Irish national team, and for Irish football more broadly. But I have rattled on for ages, and that is quite the hot potato to just gloss upon for, a little bit. So I'm probably better off holding out on that front and maybe giving it full video treatment in the future. Thank you all very much anyway, as ever, for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video or found it informative in any way, shape or form. And I mean, literally any, because apparently the like is good for me in some way. So comment if you have anything to say also. Subscribe to both this channel and my backup channel, both of which should be on your screens now, and also turn on notifications if you want to, know when a video has been uploaded. And you can also find me on Twitter, if it's still working, and on Instagram, via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.